energy and life. Homeostasis is hard work. Organisms and the cells within them have to grow and develop, move material around, build new molecules, and respond to environmental changes. What powers so much activity, and where does that power come from? Energy is the ability to do work. Your cells are busy using energy to build new molecules, contract muscles, and carry out active transport. Without the ability to obtain and use energy, life would cease to exist. ATP can easily release and store energy by breaking and reforming bonds between its phosphate groups. This characteristic of ATP this characteristic of ATP makes it useful as a basic energy source for all cells. What is ATP? ATP is one of the most important compounds that cells use to store and release energy. It is adenosine triphosphate. ATP consists of adenine, a 5-carbon sugar called ribose, and 3 phosphate groups. Adenosine diphosphate, ADP, looks almost like ATP, except that it has 2 phosphate groups instead of 3. ADP contains some energy, but not as much as ATP. ADP has some energy, but ATP has much more energy. When a cell has energy available, it can store small amounts of it by adding phosphate groups to ADP, producing ATP. Cells can release the energy stored in ATP by breaking the bonds between the second and third phosphate groups. Because a cell can add or subtract these phosphate groups, it has an efficient way of storing and releasing energy as needed. One way cells use the energy provided by ATP is to carry out active transport. Many cell membranes contain sodium-potassium pumps. ATP provides the energy that keeps these pumps working, maintaining a balance of ions on both sides of the cell membrane. ATP powers movement, providing the energy for motor proteins that contract muscle and power the movement of cilia and flagella. Cilia, little hairs, and flagella, one long like a tail. Energy from ATP powers the synthesis of proteins and responds to chemical signals of the cell surface. So ATP powers the synthesis of proteins and responds to chemical signals on the surface. ATP is not a good molecule for storing large amount of energy over the long term. It is more efficient for cells to keep only a small supply of ATP on hand. Cells can regenerate ATP from ADP as needed by using the energy in foods like glucose. So you'll see the production of ATP through glucose and also in the Krebs cycle. This is through glycolysis, and in the Krebs cycle it produces ATP, and also in electron transport produces ATP. Why is photosynthesis important to heterotrophs? In the process of photosynthesis, plants convert the energy of sunlight into chemical energy stored in the bonds of carbohydrates. Organisms that obtain food by consuming other living things are known as heterotrophs. Some heterotrophs get their food by eating plants. Other heterotrophs, such as the cheetah, obtain food from the plants indirectly by feeding on plant-eating animals. Still other heterotrophs, such as mushrooms, obtain food by decomposing other organisms. Organisms that make their own food are called autotrophs. Plants, algae, and some bacteria are able to use light energy from the sun to produce food. The process by which autotrophs use the energy in sunlight to produce high-energy carbohydrates that can be used for food is known as photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a foundational source of energy for the food chain.